Just 2 years ago, the Miami Heat made a spectacular run to the NBA Finals. They rolled over the Pacers in a convincing sweep, took down the Bucks in 5 in the Eastern Conference semis, knocked the Celtics out in 6 games, and pushed a tough defensive Lakers team to 6 games in the NBA Finals. And I think Miami could once again make another deep playoff run that results in their first Finals victory since the departure of LeBron, especially with the additions they've made this offseason. They injected playoff tried and tested players Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker into an already stout roster. But before we get into my lofty expectations for the Heat this season, we first have to explore why we saw such a significant drop-off from their championship run to last season. First, we have to start with Jimmy Butler's superhuman efforts in the playoffs. This was the best basketball Jimmy Butler has ever played. He put up 22 points, 6 boards, and nearly 7 assists a night on 49, 35, 86 splits for the entirety of the playoffs, and went up to an absolutely insane level in the finals against Los Angeles. Jimmy averaged 26 points, 8 boards, and nearly 10 assists a night on 55, 30, 88 splits. Basically, playoff and finals Jimmy was a top 10 player in basketball. And a major reason we saw a lot of regression in the offense in 2020 was just because Butler wasn't out there. Jimmy missed 20 games in 2021, and the Heat went 7-13 in those contests. Now, Jimmy wasn't the only thing that made the Heat playoff offensive engine elite, though. Goran Dragic deserves a massive amount of credit for getting tough buckets and carrying a ton of the scoring and playmaking load. He arguably played his best basketball in the 2020 postseason, posting his highest playoff points per game mark on 44-36 splits, providing Butler a safety valve to turn to with his tough mid-range bucket getting and overall craftiness. I don't want to overstate Dragic or say he was even close to Jimmy in production, but one thing's certain, the Heat could not have reached the finals without Dragic in 2020. Next, we have to take a look at Miami's elite three-point shooting. In the regular season, the Heat finished second in the entire league in three-point percentage and sixth in total three-pointers made. And part of the reason why we saw such a significant drop-off in overall efficiency was Miami's drastic drop-off in three-point shooting in 2021. The Heat went from ranking second in three-point percentage to 19th, and from sixth in three-pointers made to 14th overall. Unsurprisingly, another aspect of why Miami was able to make such a deep championship run was because of their stout team defense and their supreme depth of versatile defenders down the roster. The Heat had 3 of the best defenders against pick-and-roll rollmen in the playoffs, 3 men in the top 15 in defensive pick-and-roll rollman percentiles. Jay Crowder, the second best defender against rollmen in the playoffs, Butler, the 9th best defender against rollmen in the playoffs, and Bam Adebayo, the 13th best defender against rollmen in the playoffs. And they were also great on the perimeter. They had 6 defenders in the top half of all playoff teams against pick-and-roll ball handlers. Goran Dragic, Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero, Andre Iguodala, Jimmy Butler, and Jay Crowder. And I think it's also important to note that their great team defense led the Heat to being the second best team in transition in all of the NBA in 2020. Now, part of the slight regression of their dominant defense in 2020 was due to Jimmy Butler missing time and the losses of Jay Crowder and Derrick Jones Jr. And to accentuate the point about Jimmy, the Heat had a defensive rating of 116 with Butler off the floor and 108.5 with Butler on the floor. The difference between being the 4th best defense in all of basketball to the 2nd worst defense in all of basketball. All of this is to ask a big question. Was their championship run a fluke? Perhaps, but I don't really think so. Sure, the Heat had a horrendous road record of 14-19 during the regular season, and I genuinely do think the bubble benefited them in a way that wouldn't have benefited other teams. But that doesn't change the fact that this team was utterly dominant on their tear through the Eastern Conference. The Heat went 12-3 en route to the finals and still took the Lakers to 6 games, despite not having Bam Adebayo or Goran Dragic for a significant portion of the series. Finally, the Heat and the Lakers had the 2 shortest off seasons of any team in the league last season, and that certainly had an impact on their struggles with injuries throughout the season and overall fatigue. Both teams that made the NBA Finals in 2020, and the Lakers and the Heat, were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs last season. The only instance where that has happened in recent memory to both finals teams either missing the playoffs or getting eliminated in the first round was in 2015 with the Spurs and the Heat, and even that has a bit of a caveat on it. The Spurs won 55 games and took the Clippers to 7 games in a tightly contested Game 7, and the Heat weren't the same team after LeBron departed back to Cleveland and they missed the playoffs entirely. Regardless, Teams making the finals and then immediately getting eliminated in the first round of the playoffs or not making it altogether is completely uncharacteristic, and I think we can chalk the Heat and Lakers eliminations up to a lot of a very short offseason. So, how and why do I expect the Miami Heat to make a repeat finals run this season? Basically, they need to mirror the keys to their finals run in the bubble, and I think that formula is pretty replicable. First, the Heat have to have one of the best defenses in the NBA this season, and I think they've got the pieces to do so. Let's start with Bam Adebayo, who will once again be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate and will once again be the most versatile, switchable big man in the NBA. Adebayo was in the 90th percentile of defenders against pick-and-roll ball handlers and in the 94th percentile of defenders against post touches, all while averaging a block and a steal a game. He's not one of the most dominant straight-up rim protectors or shot blockers in the NBA, but he drives winning on that side of the floor and is one of the best defenders in the NBA point blank, period. You can't forget about Jimmy Butler on this side of the floor either. Jimmy led the entire NBA in steals last season with 2.1 per game, and he's a tremendous off-ball defender, always staying alert and rotating into passing lanes, and he's a tenacious, pesky on-ball defender as well. He's got extremely active hands, and he just makes life hard on ball handlers. He's extremely competitive, energetic, and never gives up anything easy. His defensive abilities are extremely valuable. Just look at his on-off splits. He ranked 93rd percentile in defensive points per possession last season, but so is the leadership he brings. He just instills a kind of gritty, intensive defensive mentality to the rest of the roster that you seldomly find elsewhere. I don't want to undersell the Jimmy and Bam tandem whatsoever. They are maybe the best defensive duo in the NBA. Jimmy is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and Bam is one of the most versatile interior presences we've ever seen. Now, these two guys anchor the Heat defense, but they're not the only high-impact defenders on the roster. PJ Tucker is an aforementioned key addition to this defense, and it's easy to see why. He was imperative to the Bucks' NBA title run last season with his tenacity and awareness on the glass, and his extreme defensive versatility and switchability. Most notably in the Nets series, he was tasked with switching on to everyone, from Kevin Durant to James Harden to Blake Griffin to Joe Harris, and he's capable of defending all of those guys. Now, some of you may point out the spanking that he took at the hands of Kevin Durant on a nightly basis, but come on, it's Kevin Durant. That man is basically unguardable. He's the best pure scorer in basketball. And I'm not saying he's as impactful as guys like Butler or Adebayo, but his intensity and versatility is extremely valuable to team defense. The addition of all-star caliber guard Kyle Lowry may garner more attention for the contributions he'll bring offensively, which I'll get to in a minute, but the defensive prowess Lowry brings to this team matters just as much. We all know Lowry is a charge-drawing machine, but he's also just as a tremendous guard to have for one-on-one situations. Lowry ranked in the 97th percentile of isolation defenders last season, but his on-ball defense isn't his only value. Lowry is an absolute hustler, always getting back in transition, and he's very aware. He makes timely situational decisions and rotations, and has active hands at all times, in passing lanes and on ball. The final piece to this Miami Heat defensive puzzle that could make them completely overwhelming is Victor Oladipo. Oladipo underwent quadricep surgery during the offseason, and the timetable for his return is completely up in the air. But if Oladipo can come back to what he was once healthy, this Miami defense becomes even more terrifying. Oladipo is another tremendous one-on-one defender. He ranked 82nd percentile as a defender in isolation last season in Houston, and is also great at defending the pick and roll. He ranked in the 71st percentile in defending against pick and roll ball handlers last season. Like his cohorts, Oladipo is another guy with extremely active hands and innate awareness, and if he comes back to full health and resembles himself, the depth of defensive weapons Miami will possess is just downright unfair. Now, while I like a lot of the defensive pieces here, I genuinely do question if they will be enough to see massive growth. This Heat roster is still sorely lacking another impact rim protector and interior presence in non-Adebayo minutes. Miami ranked 29th in total rebounding last season and dead last in blocks. The loss of Precious Achiuwa in the Lowry sign-in trade hurts because he was expected to play the bench big role and help improve their issues in those regards to some extent, so now that burden falls solely on Dwayne Dedmon. I like Dwayne, but I'd like a little more athletic bench big who can get more vertical for shot attempts and boards. Again, I love the depth of pieces here and the additions that they have made, but rim protection and rebounding are two of the most important aspects of basketball, and they are probably still going to struggle in those regards in non-Adebayo minutes. That being said, I still think the Miami Heat have a potential to be a top 5 defensive unit this season. They should be super competitive, extremely hounding, and just downright pesky. The Heat were 7th in defensive rating last year, and while they may have not found that other impact interior presence, I still expect major improvement on the defensive side with the additions that they've made. But that's only one part of the game. Miami still has to figure out their offensive woes from 2021. They ranked 18th in offensive rating last season and struggled in the half court. And the first step in improving back to near top 10 status like they were during their championship run is once again letting Jimmy run the show. Like I mentioned earlier, Jimmy has demonstrated that when you give him the keys of an offense and supply him with knockdown shooters and a dangerous rim-running roll man, there are a few better playmakers in the league. But also, like I noted earlier, Jimmy wasn't the only offensive engine that carried the Heat offense. Goran Dragic was imperative to that deep playoff run as well. So the next step in replicating that championship formula is getting Dragic-level production from Jimmy's co-star, and we should easily expect that with the addition of Kyle Lowry. Lowry has averaged over 6 assists per game every season of his career as a starter and is a perfect secondary creator. My only concern with the supplementation of Dragic is I don't think Lowry is as exceptional of a creator in the mid-range. Look, Lowry is solid at getting to the rack, he's a really good finisher, has a decent floater game, but he isn't as good at Dragic as creating shots off of the dribble. He shot 34% on pull-up jumpers last season and will need to shoot better than that come playoff time to maximize this Heat offense. That being said, Lowry is still an all-star caliber guard and the best addition that the Heat could have made in replacing the aging Dragic. But he's not the only player that can help in supplementing Dragic's playoff dominance. Tyler Hero can also help supplement Dragic's playoff value, and I expect him to take a massive step up this season in all facets of his game. His production out of the pick and roll, his off-the-dribble shooting, his efficiency in between the lane, and playmaking. I've got him earmarked as my pick for most improved player, and for good reason. Last season, he shot 44% on pull-up jumpers, 43% on floaters, and was an above-average pick-and-roll ball handler. But he's been even more impressive this season. He shot over 50% from deep on 25 points per game in the preseason, and he has absolutely balled out in his first 2 games this year. He put up 27 and 5 on the Bucks' heads and showcased his deceptive handle, shot creation off the dribble, and some playmaking. And he followed up that performance with a 30-piece on the Pacers. The kid is just an uber-talented and uber-confident scorer, and he's putting up these scoring numbers right now off of the bench. Hero can genuinely take the ceiling of this Heat offense to fringe top 5 status if he continues to show strides as a playmaker and shooter off the dribble. The final cog in the offense showing massive improvement is the growth of Bam Adebayo. Bam is already a dominant rim runner and lob threat as well as a great passer and creator, and he routinely ran the show last season when Jimmy missed time out with injury. He's also already a pretty good shooter. He shot 42% out of the mid-range and off of pull-up jumpers last season and 45% on straight-up jump shots last year. If Bam shows continued growth in his jumper out to the perimeter or continued growth as a ball handler and playmaker, the Heat will be an absolutely overwhelming squad on both ends of the ball. Now, I wouldn't bank on Bam extending out to behind the arc. He only shot 8 threes all of last season, but he gives Miami enough floor spacing with his fluid, consistent knockdown mid-range game. And on the topic of perimeter shooting, the Heat again need to be one of the best three-point shooting teams in the NBA, and they certainly have the weapons to do it. Duncan Robinson returns to this rotation and is one of the best marksmen on the move or off the catch in the entire league. Robinson shot 44.6% from deep and 46% off the catch on 8 attempts in his first full season in Miami. Now, we saw a slight drop-off in efficiency to 40.8% from deep and 42% off the catch last season, but that's nothing truly alarming. Robinson is still one of the best pure shooters in the league and will continue to be one of the best this season. I expect massive growth from Tyler Hero as an on-ball creator, but continued dominance as a straight-up catch-and shooter. With Lowry in the fold, there'll be even more space on the floor for Hero to run and get off wide-open looks. He's a tremendous off-ball relocator and an absolute bucket off the catch. Now, we saw a slight drop-off in overall three-point percentage from Hero's rookie to sophomore seasons from 38.9% to 36%, but that was mostly because of the degree of difficulty of the shots he was taking from behind the arc. Regardless, he shot 40% off the catch last season and will once again be up near that mark again. Now that brings us to Kyle Lowry. He'll be utilized as an off-ball catch and shooter just as much as he'll be utilized as an on-ball playmaker and creator for this offense. Lowry is as consistent as they come as a shooter. He's been above 35% from deep every year as a starter and was up near 40% from deep last season in Tampa. Now, Lowry's not as exceptional as an off-the-dribble three-point shooter, but he won't be expected to huck up a lot of those type of shots. With Jimmy running the show and Hero getting touches as a point man, Lowry will just need to knock down catch-and-shoot attempts. And considering Kyle knocked down his catch-and-shoot attempts at nearly a 42% clip last season, his addition means the Heat have another deadly knockdown shooter to space the floor off ball. So, while the Heat are a long shot to win the NBA championship and far more unlikely to get out of the East than the likes of Milwaukee or Brooklyn, I think there's a chance. This team has the highest 3-and-D ceiling out of any team out East. They'll be great in transition again and have two high-level offensive creators with the chance to have a third genuine top-level creator if Tyler Hero maximizes his potential. Just take a look at what the Heat did to the Bucks on day 3 of the season. They beat the reigning NBA champions by 42 points. 42. They ran the Bucks in transition, played absolute stout defense, shot them to death, and stifled Giannis after the Bucks had already slayed the Nets in their previous matchup. Look, I don't want to draw complete conclusions off of one game, but Miami gave the Bucks an absolute drubbing. And if they can do that to the reigning NBA champions, coupled with the reasons that I've laid out, then I have full confidence that this dark horse can make another deep playoff run that results in an NBA championship. If you have made it this far in the video, I thank you so much for watching, and I implore you to subscribe and stick around and check out some of the other video content we have on the channel. My buddy Carson just recently did one on Russell Westbrook and why he is the Lakers' biggest issue. My buddy Carvel did one recently on the Warriors and why they could continue their dynasty this season. And you can check out all of the other podcasts that we do on the channel. We do 3 a week, 2 on the NBA, 1 on the NFL, and they are live here on YouTube. And you can also check out all of Nerd Sesh content on nerdsesh.com. We have written articles, we have our video content, and we have all of our podcast content there. So I implore you to go check that out as well. And if you want to stay up to date on all of Nerd Sesh's content across all of our channels and streams, you can follow us on Twitter at nerd_sesh and on Instagram at nerdsesh. Thank you guys so much for watching. We would be nothing without you guys. Nerd Sesh fans are the best. I cannot thank you guys enough. And again, thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button and stick around for a little bit. And I hope to see you guys soon.